All right. Hey, everybody. Brittany and I are back. And today we're going to, I have to just tell them really quickly about why I'm laughing, because she just changed the angle of her camera, but she's got this like really sweet motorcycle in her garage. And I was like, and she doesn't know how to ride it, but she was saying, I said, if you show that, everyone's going to picture that you ride it and do sexy poses on it, just the way her clothes match the motorcycle and everything. Anyways, we are here to not talk about motorcycles, but exercise progression. And we could tell from all the comments, this is a hot topic. So I'm going to stop rambling and let her actually talk about it. And I think that Brittany was just going to start with all of you that listed certain exercises, and just, we're going to plug away at them. I am going to be mindful that we keep this for 30 minutes because I want it short and sweet. And then if we need to do this part 2, then we'll do a part 2. Sound good, Brittany?
Sounds awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Mel, that based on the feedback that was given in the comments to this post, I think my initial gut feel is that the volume of content is going to kind of surpass the 30 minutes.
I get it.
And I don't want to do any particular exercise a disservice as far as the explanation. So I could see this evolving into a
go ahead and like, I'd rather you like spend the time you want to spend the time on it, and don't be offended if we cut you off. I think it's just a good part 2. So okay. Maybe just kind of like in your head, think about how you want to lump them. Like if you want to lump them into, whatever.
Sure. Yeah. And I might just kind of go in order of the questions, and kind of to start out, I do want everyone that's going to tune in and here today to just keep in mind, when I talk about these exercise progressions, everybody they're very much individual, depending on your previous or current fitness level, previous experience with training, how pregnancy was for you, what your birth story was like, if you have any diagnosis of pelvic floor dysfunction. And so I'll try and shine light on like giving clinical examples of in this circumstance, these would be things that I would look at. And hopefully that will shed some light on that for you guys. And then also keep in mind where you are timeline-wise postpartum, because for certain activities, I tend to be a little bit on the cautious side, especially with some of the literature that's available now on tensile strength of fascial tissue, connective tissue postpartum. And I do think there are infinite number of options from a training perspective to avoid impact activities until you're kind of within that 3 to 6 month window. So we'll discuss what those options are, so that if you are going back to a CrossFit gym or functional fitness in some capacity, personally like that there are options out there for you. So first of all, why don't we talk about jumping jacks? Really common one I find, really common with leaking. Patients who leak. How about you, Mel? What's your opinion from that perspective?
Totally. There's always, I would say, apprehension is definitely one, pressure. But yes, leaking I think is probably the symptom that you'll see most for sure. Yeah. And it's even in women before pregnancy.
Totally. Because there's a lot happening, and I think as we are moving the legs apart, there's more happening from the pelvic floor to be able to maintain that control.
Totally. I was going to say because I'll just show it while you're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you put like everything on length, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So from a muscle perspective, it's hardest to have best control at end range, either end range. So either on length. So for people, this will be a common one, like coming out of the bottom of a pull-up. It's always hardest to like get started, that initial range. So the pelvic floor is kind of the same thing when the legs are spread apart. So I will show, there's lots of things we can tweak with jumping jacks just by breaking it apart. All right. Can you see me here okay? I'm gonna lift that up a little bit. See, and my head's not cut off. Okay, So for jumping jack, I would break it down into like half the body. So instead of having the whole movement happening at once, we can step out to the side and together. So that can even turn into a control lunge here. If you slow the movement down and incorporate the core breath like you would have been exposed to in the Mummy Berries program, make sure that you're breathing, you can relax on the way out and then connect on the way up. And sometimes that's not even the breath pattern that might work for someone. So you might find, oh, that doesn't feel right for me. So the breathing pattern, you might try the opposite. So if I can control this, okay, then you can add the arm movement if you want. And then you can increase the speed. Okay, I would always make sure that during this, I'm staying in control of my trunk, so the rib cage to the pelvis, and my femur, my leg bone, is tracking in line with essentially the second toe of your foot. So as I come out, I'm not just allowing everything to collapse with it.
Yeah.
Okay? Then I would just break it into slower movements, so not trying to do it so quickly, but it would be out and in. And here, this one's about that pressure management. So not just holding your breath and bracing with everything, not landing really abruptly, because that's another thing that we want to think of the pelvic floor like that trampoline. You want to be able to have it accommodate. So when we land, we want to land soft so we can allow it to accommodate to that force. Okay, so then we just, if that felt okay, give yourself a break in between your repetitions. And then we just kind of start to stack it up. If you've done 4 or 5 repetitions and it's feeling good, then you can just pause, regroup, and then come back to it. So I would say that's how I would typically, with someone, break it apart and then build it back up.
Totally. Awesome.
Okay, so that's an example for jumping. And again, just coming back to, it's very individual and to what your story is and what your diagnosis is. So it's really important that you have these conversations with your healthcare professionals or your pelvic floor physio in your area that you're working with.
Totally. I'm going to use someone that I told her to watch this, told her to come live. So I'm going to get mad at her for not being here. No, just joking. But she was a client of mine last night and we were talking about leaking with jumping activity. So I'm just going to use her as an example in here. And I told her she's like, so should I avoid them? I'm like, don't necessarily think about that. But like I said, to think of your threshold, like what your threshold is the leaking. She was noticing leaking. It's not like she had pain. It's not like her back hurt, anything like that. She was having leaking. So please tell me if you would tell someone something differently. But I said, like, yeah, it's like break it down, think about doing less of them or whatever, or intermittent with something else, but hit the threshold, but don't blow past it. It's important that we kind of, push ourselves a little bit. But yeah, what is your threshold? Because your threshold is different than someone else's, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And for myself, one that I deal with all of the time in the CrossFit community is leaking with double unders, which is a skipping movement. So it's just like skipping. It's just you're doing 2 revolutions of the rope every time you jump. And I see the same kind of problems there. It's that people are so apprehensive of the movement that they just grip everything. So it's like, oh my God, I'm going to jump, so I need to hold on for dear life. But then we have no access of like the movement and the range of motion of the pelvic floor to accommodate for the pressure.
Yes. Yes. Interject again. I had another client yesterday, double unders leaking. And that's what she said. I said, I wanted her to go into it and like listen to her body and like what's going on. And she said, I noticed when I did some relaxation before I did it, I didn't leak as much. I'm like, perfect. I'm like, I think, and I'll bet you anything, you're going into it anticipating leaking. Our pelvic floor is supposed to stop us from leaking. So you like call on all the tension that you can possibly think of. And so exactly, I think that's an awesome point. Like, notice your habits in it all. Yeah.
Yeah. So double unders are another one. Like I'm going to talk about it a little bit because it's so common. common things that I see with double unders. Just gonna grab my rope. I'm not gonna skip well, but I just will give you some postural things that I see with double unders. So again, a lot of times people just like hold on for dear life. So as soon as they're going to jump, they like bring their knees together. They're trying to hold on to the pelvic floor. And a lot of times they even fall into an anterior, we call this an anterior tilt. And when we do that, we're actually less able to access our pelvic floor. So a lot of times things that I work on with people is think we want to push away from the floor rather than pull away from the floor. So if I'm jumping, it's a push, okay? When we're landing, we want to think about, again, that like landing soft to absorb the impact. And thinking about, I really incorporate breath work for people in double unders, because I find when people hold on for everything, there's no access to the pelvic floor, that has nowhere to go. So when you thinking about letting go or exhaling slightly on those the landing phase of your jump. So that would be things I would always look at. I would look at what's happening with the pelvis, what's happening as far as the femurs. Are they pulling into it? Are you pushing off? And a lot of times people are just really hard landers and holding on for dear life, because the last thing they want to do is leak. And unfortunately, that strategy is just contributing to the symptoms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's double unders that we weren't necessarily going to talk about, but I think
skipping is a really good one.
Yeah. So the next one was pull-ups and box jumps. Now, just thinking here how we can break this up. I mean, box jumps is a great one because, again, it's a very common one for people to struggle with. And I think when you're in a gym environment and that's what you're told to do, you don't necessarily know that there are very similar, simple options for you to choose instead. So when it comes to box jumps, if you're in that like 3 to 6 month window or prior to that point, I would always say we scale that or modify that to a step up. So we're taking away that impact. It still has the cardiovascular benefit. It allows you to slow down enough that you can really think about what's happening from your midline and that control of the trunk and the pelvis as you're moving. And then breaking it down when you feel like you've got the step ups down and you're not experiencing any symptoms. So again, like those symptoms of leaking, heaviness, pressure, back pain, hip pain, they're all kind of your indicators that your body is crying for help, in a sense that it's not tolerating what you're throwing at it. Oh. Yeah, so we want to find those slightly easier options. So for box jumps, again, I would scale you to a step up. And if you're in a gym setting, you can go as low as you need to with the step up. So you can start with plates. And then if you're going from a plate, then you can add the plates, or if the gym that you're at has a variety of options as far as sizes of boxes, then you're just going slightly taller with the box. In a CrossFit world, like this would be the lowest option that you would have for a box. So I always get people down on plates first and then gradually building themselves up. Making sure, again, that you're able to have good trunk control, access to your bum. So that leaning forward, pressing the heel down, stepping up. You may change on the top of the box. or alternate at the bottom. And I would really focus on, again, where are you breathing in the movement, incorporating that breath, core breath to the exercise. So I would exhale on the way up. It's going to help us access that pelvic floor. Inhale on the way down. And again, thinking about that soft landing as you are inhaling to make contact with the floor. Then how I would break that down after is if you're doing that successfully, feeling great, then I would come to the floor and practice jump with an athletic landing. Again, making sure that as we land, we're landing soft. Our knees are staying in line with the second toe. I see this a lot with my pelvic floor patients. Or this, like landing really firm and not accommodating to that impact. If you can do 10 jumps successfully here, then maybe we're thinking about jumping up onto a surface. And again, you're basically just backing it up to a low plate and then progressively increasing your height. And again, like we just discussed, is you want to touch up against that, your limit, essentially.
Totally.
Yeah, so that's how I would break down box jumps.
Awesome.
Again, very individual. Like if you're having, there's a lot to think about from a pressure management perspective for people with prolapse. So there's all sorts of strategies that I personally would incorporate with patients, but again, that's very individual. So I would say, again, I really encourage you to work with a healthcare professional in your area that's knowledgeable in your sport or your exercise choices.
Yep.
And know that there are many people out there that are on your team, in the sense that if you see someone and they just tell you to not do that activity and there's not a rationale as to why or for how long, then maybe question that. And there's always second opinions out there.
Totally. Exactly. I think that the biggest thing when I watch this, I think, awesome, people have like a plan, like you're giving them a plan, because I think that, like, I'll speak to this girl that came in last night, and I think like she's used to her exercises before. And like, this was me my first time too. Is like, you're used to doing everything before and you can't necessarily like think of the other options. When you watch it, you're kind of like, well, duh, like, of course I could break it down, but you don't necessarily think through it because you always did it a certain way before, right? And so I think that I love that. I hope everyone watches this and like, sweet, I can start back. I can start taking the steps back to my favorite exercise. There's nothing that is like totally off limits. You just have to be smart with how you get back to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's so much variety in training that control piece. Like,
yeah,
for me, I always slow it down. You want control and ownership over the movement before velocity or adding complexity. And that's where a lot of times, unfortunately, the societal norm or what society pushes on women doesn't set them up for success from that perspective. And then sometimes our ego gets in the way as well.
Totally.
You know, we really do want to get back to where we were before. But there are an infinite, like I can't say it enough, like an infinite number of options that might just look slightly different than what you did before.
Absolutely. And that's what I think I say at the end of the Mommy Berries program. I say, all you're getting out of this program is like the control and awareness. But now I want you to think of like, the world is your oyster. Like, now find the ways, like you have those very basic tools, but now find the ways to kind of put it into practice. Anyways, Absolutely. Keep going, Brittany. What's your next one?
Let's do, I put my book down here. Let's do pull-up progression, okay? Because pull-up is one that, I don't know, I fit into this camp. It's like, as women, I always wanted to pull up. I wanted to be able to do a strict pull-up. But we're definitely at risk of injury. And from a pressure management perspective, this one is really hard. And to be honest, I would actually, the very first regression for a pull-up I would do is some floor work progression as far as ab control. So if this is maybe someone with diastasis, this would be a really one for you to focus on. And then again, from a pressure standpoint. So my like way back up control perspective for pull-up would be bringing it right down to the floor.
Brittany, you're gonna have to slide your chair, I think.
You bet. So I'd bring it right down to the floor and look at, in the CrossFit world, we call these hollow holds. And we can break it up to as easy as you need to. But when we're, for example, on the bar, we need enough deep canister control that our lats don't win as we're trying to pull us into extension. Okay, so here we can come into a nice little ball, find our core breath here. Okay, then we can progress this challenge as much as we need to. So I'm adding on a little bit of upper abs here by reaching down. Again, you want to make sure based on your symptoms, can you do this without seeing any of that doming or pinching at the midline? If you can't, then this exercise is too hard for you. Okay, and we can back it up even more. But if you're able to control here, our progressions for hollow holds would be extending one leg. We can then extend the arms. If you're able to maintain that, then you can extend the other leg, and you can even come in and out of that position as you need to. But a strong hollow hold position is really important for then how I back up a pull-up, if you don't have them, is a body row or a ring row. Can you see me okay there? I feel like I'm speak out of the camera. So again, I want to come back to Mel's core breath with her Mommy Berries, like the From the Inside Out program. Okay, so if you're here, I want a nice straight line from my heels, hips, knees, shoulders, core breath. Exhale on the effort. Okay, so exhale as I pull my chest towards the rings. So this would be my first variation for a pull-up. You can make that more challenging by having the rings longer so that you're closer to the floor, you're more parallel with the floor. Okay. Then, depending on who you speak to, from if they believe in bands or not. I'm as an orthopedic physio as well, I'm not a big believer in bands and going into kipping. I would rather work on some strength work. So once you can do good midline control without breath holding or anything funny happening with a body row, and we're almost parallel with the floor, then I would go to like an eccentric lowering of a pull-up. So with this one, if you were at the gym, you would make sure you had a box next to this position, okay? You'd have a box, you would be high enough that you could start from this position, that nice hollow, and then slowly lowering. Eccentrics are harder from a muscle standpoint, so you want to be very careful with volume, like if you're getting into that. And I would again make sure you're working with your healthcare professional or a really good trainer who knows how to program volume for that. But the biggest thing I look with pull-ups is like, what's happening here? I should be able to still breathe. I should not be going into a big extension, or I should not be like flexing and using my hip flexors more. And then if you have enough strength for, I don't know what the research is out there, I think they say a 20-second negative, which is pretty slow, then in theory, you should be strong enough to do a full pull-up. Here, I would say from like, you can do negatives, you can do scapular pull-ups from this position. because a lot of times with the ladies, again, this is just me coming at it from my orthopedic lens versus the pelvic health, is we lack kind of the shoulder stability to even hang from the bar properly. So there's an infinite number of drills and progressions for just being able to hang from the bar.
Oh God.
and have that deep unit.
That's so a hard one. Like there's no way I could do a pull-up.
Yeah, it takes time. Like
exactly. That would be something that I would have to go right back to the hollow hold.
Yeah, I would, and then do a lot of like lat strength. Women just generally don't have the lat strength, and so there's lots of stuff that you can do from a lat perspective. Dumbbell rows, pendlay rows, barbell work, like there's lots to do. But again, it's just reaching out to someone who will get you where you want to go, and depending on what your goals are.
Totally. Do you have one more, Brittany? Should we try to squeeze one more in?
Let's squeeze squats in, because again, like you said, squats are in our everyday life.
Okay, perfect.
Squats and deadlifts. Unfortunately, I don't have a barbell here today, but I will use my trusty broomstick. And we'll just go through some teaching points as far as what I look for. Like I honestly, I don't know about you, Mel, but I could honestly spend a session to 2 sessions in clinic working on setting the foundation of someone's squat.
Totally.
So it's there's a lot to think about. It is a complicated movement, although people just think like, I do it every day.
Well, and that's why I think it's important. I've had lots of clients come in and say that I've been told not to squat. And I'm like, oh shoot, that's unfortunate, because I think you should. I think you need to, and you're going to do it regardless of whether you know you're doing it or not. So like, let's optimize that. So yeah.
Cool. So I'll go through some key teaching points with the squat. So if we're talking about just a body weight squat first, a lot of times, actually, I don't know about you, Mel, but I'll back it right up to like a sit to stand.
Yep.
Just so you're giving someone a target to move back to. So if we're saying we're going to do sit to stand with the box behind me, what I look for is foot placement first. Okay, so generally speaking, you want feet between hip and shoulder width apart, with varying degrees of turnout, depending on how you're built. Okay, so that again depends on hip structure. Can you see me okay there? Is it a little dark?
No, it's fine.
Okay, so between hip and shoulder width apart. Okay, if I'm looking from this side, I want to maintain a nice neutral spine. I always get my women to think like from the bottom up first to set. So we do want to think here, again, bringing on our lower abdominals, our pelvic floor, like that dial system. So depending on what we're holding and how much load we have, we'll call it on more or less, but we want to maintain that neutral spine. I always use the reference of tracking our femurs in line with the second toe. And we want to send our hips back and down by bending at our hips and our knees together. So a lot of times people are like knee dominant and keep our trunk upright, or they're hip dominant and treat it more like a deadlift, because at some point in time they've heard, don't let your knees pass your toes.
Right.
So I say connect bottom up first. As I inhale, I let my pelvic floor relax. Okay, and exhale, bum squeeze to stand. So I'm maintaining my neutral curve as I come down into the squat and back up. So if you're watching from the front, some things, again, that the femur tracking is really important. So some people start really narrow with their squat and then run out of room and have nowhere to go. So if we're a little bit wider and allow our femurs to track over the second toe, You want to see about foot pressure too. So a lot of people, for some weird reason, I don't know, teaching physios have taught squats like you want your weight in your heels. And I use reference point of think of your foot like a tripod, and you want your big toe joint, your baby toe joint, and your heel. That creates your tripod, and you want to create a center of pressure within those 3 points. So usually that center of pressure is somewhere closer to the front edge of the heel towards your midfoot. Okay. And again, like I treat it slow and controlled. So as I come down, I can inhale, relax into that position, exhale, bum squeeze to stand. That's going to change a little bit if I'm holding load. So if I have a kettlebell, holding a kettlebell in front, I really like goblet squats because it turns into a little bit of trunk work, postural work. Okay, and it helps us keep our trunk up a little bit because some people really fall into this pattern. And as you stand, I like to think you're pushing your knees into the floor versus lifting up with our back. And again, like from a pelvic floor lens, there's lots to think about within that. What strategy are you using? Are you breath holding and holding on for dear life? I see that strategy a lot. Or I see kind of a trouble with awareness of what the midline is even doing. And then for a lot of women, thinking out the breath, like I don't know if postpartum, we just don't think about that as much. And I see a lot of ladies in the gym, they might go through 5 or 6 reps and haven't taken a breath yet. So they're in that breath holding strategy, and it's not optimizing our deep canister, which essentially if we optimize breath, then we're naturally creating that stability that we need.
Well, this is just how I explain it to people, is I think that like when that balloon pops and we have that baby, like we're left with this whole big like canister, as you say, like it's like lost its relationship. It feels a bit different. And I think that we do all sorts of things to find that stability again. And I think one of them is hold our breath.
Right.
I think that's one strategy they use to try to create stability. It feels tight. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I agree. So again, with squats, like I can break that up in an infinite number of ways. Again, I really like split squats for ladies and tempo, so that you're learning how to orient and maintain control of the pelvis as you move in space and separate the pelvis and the trunk stability from hip movement.
Totally. Just demonstrate those really quickly. And
okay.
Then.
So there's a ton of variations on split squats, but if I just went, I think the lighting's better this way. So if I just have one foot in front of the other, like I'm going to do a lunge, okay? Rear foot the heel is elevated. Here again, I'll find my core breath, dropping the back knee directly towards the floor, and only lowering as deep into this position as I can maintain control here and not have any symptom reproduction, okay? So you can fiddle this with having your rear foot on a wall. You can have your front foot elevated on a plate. Same thing with the rear foot. So there's a lot that you can do with challenging that midline control without impact and velocity.
Totally. A good lead up to like running though, because it's one leg, you know, you're having to, like you said, split the pelvis. Yeah.
Right. Yep. And yeah, running for runners, I always give kind of that split squat variation in just that top range, your partial squat.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
So which ones did we not get to, Brittany?
I think clean and jerk and deadlift. So
okay. Awesome. I think let's do this. Let's leave this one for everybody to watch, and then let's see like what questions people are left with, and if it brings to mind any other exercises, and let's plan another part 2. You and I can talk about a date. We'd love your feedback on that, and then we'll add some other exercises to it and get to those ones that we didn't get to.
Sounds great.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Also too, like, I think that we were talking really quickly before we hit record on this. You guys, if anyone needs individual help, I think like Brittany's someone that you can reach out to, like to set up a one-on-one session. Plus we were talking about a trainer that she works with that does, maybe you want to talk about him a little bit and just let him know what resources he has for people.
Yeah, sure. His name's Isaac Smith. On Instagram, I think his handle's IJS89. And he's an elite level coach. He has an Olympic weightlifter on his team at the moment, but I work very closely with him with my postpartum women, because he does exactly that. He can back it up to the basics to really set a good foundation and progress in a very safe and logical manner. And he, for people that want the guesswork out of it, right? Like if they want to get back to exercise and like, I don't
want
know.
Someone to coach them through it.
Yeah, that's right.
And what can he offer online to people?
Well, I think he does monthly programming as an option.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if anyone's curious, reach out to me or send him a message, and he can discuss that with you.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. I think that's a good option, and we look forward.
And that makes me think too, not to ramble on too long, but again, when we talk about kind of that progressive midline control, like your Mummy Berry program is really kind of the starting the conversation.
Yeah.
And here, if anyone's in the Halifax area, we do offer an 8-week progressive ab rehab class as well.
Exactly. So there's options. We are here to help sort those out for you. So we welcome your feedback on this. Please do us a favor and comment something below this so that we know if people are watching it and you're finding it helpful, because these are for you. Okay. Anyways, thanks everybody, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much, Brittany.
Yeah, thank you.